Welcome to this dedicated deep dive. We aim for a calm, professional analysis of, well, quite a confluence of events these past 2 weeks. Early November 2025, we're looking at domestic policy, geopolitical shifts, security challenges, quite a lot happening.
Indeed. Our mission here is really to sift through that noise, connect the dots for you.
Exactly. Give you the critical intelligence needed to understand the bigger picture.
And when you synthesize the information, from all the sources, there are really three main patterns emerging. First, a definite escalation in domestic security enforcement alongside new legislative moves.
Okay.
Second, some pretty significant shifts in U.S. foreign policy, think nuclear posture, climate, military projection. Big changes there.
Right.
And third, these actions are constantly bumping up against legal and political challenges regarding executive power. That's a recurring theme.
That tension, executive action versus, let's call it institutional resistance, that really does seem to be the backbone of what we're seeing. Before we dive deeper, we do want to acknowledge our sponsor, ProWave AI. And just to be clear, this entire analysis is generated and powered by Stylo News. That's the AI-powered news application synthesizing information from a vast global network.
A very useful tool for this kind of work.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start with the domestic front. The administration seems to be taking a very strong stance on political enforcement. The big headline was the executive order designating ANTIFA as a domestic terrorist organization.
Yes, and critically, this wasn't just symbolic. It had immediate follow-up in Congress.
Tell us about that.
Well, almost immediately, U.S. senators introduced the Stop Antifa Act. Now, this is important for two reasons. One, it tries to make that domestic terrorist label official federal law.
Codifying.
Exactly. And two, it specifically tasks the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, with investigations. So, you see, it shifts certain kinds of political activity squarely into the realm of counterterrorism.
Which obviously has implications on the ground. We saw local flashpoints almost immediately, didn't we?
We did. At Arizona State University, for example, the College Republicans United group started actively identifying and reporting people they alleged were Antifa members to federal authorities. That, predictably, ramped up tensions significantly on campus.
And it went beyond just tension in some places. UC Berkeley saw actual violence.
Yes. A Turning Point USA event there led to violent clashes. We're talking physical fights, projectiles being used.
Yeah.
It was serious enough that the Department of Justice stepped in.
The DOJ.
Attorney General Bondi and Assistant Attorney General Dillon announced a major federal investigation, citing concerns about Antifa's role, yes, but also about what they termed campus security failures in protecting free speech.
So a picture of pretty aggressive federal intervention emerges. But you mentioned resistance earlier. That's playing out too.
It is. A key example comes from Oregon. A federal judge actually extended an order preventing President Trump from deploying the National Guard to Portland to manage the unrest there.
On what grounds?
Explicitly citing the 10th Amendment. The judge essentially ruled that the federal executive can't just override a state's authority and deploy troops like the National Guard within its borders without proper constitutional or legislative basis, especially if the state government objects.
Right, the federalism argument. A check on executive power.
Precisely. It underscores that ongoing power struggle between Washington and the states.
Now, broadening out from direct conflict, what about the impact on civil society organizations? We're hearing about increased scrutiny of certain nonprofits.
Yes, particularly those associated with leftist causes. Sources are reporting a really stark economic impact, something like a 419% surge in job losses and grant freezes within that NGO sector.
Wow, 419%. That's dramatic.
It is, and this is happening while some security-focused reports are alleging significant foreign funding, nearly $2 billion from European billionaires funneled through NGOs to influence U.S. policy. The implication, of course, is that these networks are now under federal investigation.
And this isn't just a U.S. domestic issue, is it? We're seeing echoes internationally.
Unfortunately, yes. In Germany, Antifa militants claimed responsibility for setting fire to the car of a senior politician from the AfD party. That's the alternative for Deutschland.
Germany's right-wing populist party.
Correct. And what's quite chilling is that the militants explicitly linked their actions to the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk back in the U.S. It suggests a sort of shared transnational extremist mindset.
That connection is definitely disturbing. It points to this friction becoming, globalized.
It certainly seems that way.
Okay, let's pivot a bit. Let's talk about government operations, the economy, and maybe the political signals being sent. We had the government shutdown dragging on for 30 days.
Yes, a full month.
Yet amidst that, President Trump hosted a large Halloween party at the White House. Costumes, guests, the optics of that, celebrating during a shutdown were, well, notable.
They were. And at the same time, the administration's core economic policy, tariffs, was facing a major legal test.
Right, the Supreme Court case challenging the use of emergency powers to impose tariffs on, what was it, over 100 countries?
That's the one. Oral arguments were heard. And the interesting thing here, based on reporting from the court,
Yes.
is that even the conservative justices seemed quite skeptical about such a broad use of executive emergency powers for trade policy.
Skeptical, what does that potentially signal?
Well, it signals deep constitutional questions. The court seems to be probing whether a president can essentially bypass Congress indefinitely using emergency declarations to set wide-ranging long-term trade rules. If the court, particularly its conservative wing, rules against the administration.
It could seriously limit that power for future presidents, too.
Absolutely. It would be a major check on unilateral executive action in the economic sphere.
Yet, the administration is still pushing the tariff policy hard, even framing it as a revenue generator.
That's right. President Trump is talking about trillions in potential revenue from tariffs and has proposed using that money for a $2,000 dividend to most Americans, excluding high earners.
So, positioning it as a way to ease debt and help consumers directly.
And you can see why they might feel the need to address consumer concerns, especially after recent local election results.
Ah, yes. The results in places like New York City, New Jersey, Virginia, Republicans didn't fare well.
No, complete losses in key urban and suburban areas. And the analysis widely attributes this to voter frustration over inflation and the rising cost of living.
So those results are a clear warning shot ahead of the 2026 midterms.
Very clear. Vice President Vance even acknowledged that concern publicly. You can see how policies like the tariff dividend or the separate push to end Obamacare and give health funds directly to citizens might be attempts to respond to that economic anxiety.
Trying to address those pocketbook issues that clearly hurt them locally.
Exactly. Now, if we shift our gaze outward, look at how the U.S. is acting on the world stage. It mirrors the domestic assertiveness in many ways.
A more unilateral posture abroad as well.
Definitely. The U.S. completely skipped the COP30 climate summit in Brazil. That breaks a 30-year tradition of engagement with UN climate talks. It's a very clear signal rejecting that global consensus approach.
Putting national priorities first, it seems.
That's the framing. And on the security front, the actions are just as bold. President Trump confirmed plans to resume nuclear testing.
After a 3-decade pause.
Yes, a voluntary moratorium is ending. This obviously raises significant international security alarms. It could destabilize arms control efforts and signals a return to maybe a more confrontational Cold War-style nuclear stance.
And meanwhile, conventional military power is also being projected more assertively, particularly in the Western Hemisphere.
Very much so. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, that's a major asset, over 4,000 sailors deployed to the Caribbean. Officially, it's under U.S. Southern Command to boost counter-drug and anti-terror operations.
But deploying a carrier strike group that close to Latin America sends a broader message, too.
Undoubtedly. And then there's Mexico. The U.S. is reportedly preparing covert military missions inside Mexico targeting drug cartels. We're talking drone strikes, intelligence flights, going after labs and leaders.
Covert military action inside Mexico, even if coordinated, that's incredibly sensitive.
Extremely sensitive and carries significant risk. Further south, near Venezuela, tensions are described as very high. U.S. military deployments have increased, and reports mention strategic options being considered, including things like rapid strikes or even regime decapitation.
Regime decapitation, that's a stark military term.
It is. It calmly refers to targeted operations aimed at removing key political and military leaders to essentially dismantle a government quickly. The fact it's reportedly being considered highlights the seriousness of the situation.
So how is this broader military posture being interpreted geopolitically?
Well, you see analysis like that from Yakov Kedmi, predicting potential U.S.-Russia talks focused on defining formal spheres of influence. Basically, a deal where Russia stays out of the Americas and the U.S. asserts dominance in, say, post-Soviet states. It's a very old-school, great power politics approach.
A return to realpolitik.
It seems like it. And then, further afield, in the Middle East, there are reports the U.S. plans to build a large military base near the Gaza border to support post-conflict stabilization. That signals a much deeper, longer-term U.S. military footprint in that region's security setup.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, domestic enforcement, economic battles, foreign policy shifts, military moves, how do we synthesize this?
Well, you see clear differences in perspective driving decisions. The administration's focus seems overwhelmingly on national security, law and order, sovereignty.
Right.
Think the ANTIFA designation, the tariffs, ditching COP30.
Right, that's their lens.
While the opposition in Congress and resistance at the state level tends to focus more on, well, the mechanics of reopening government, civil liberties concerns about things like the ANTIFA designation, and, importantly, the economic pain people are feeling from inflation. That's what drove those local election results.
And international
Concern. Diplomats. Institutions. They're worried about nuclear testing, the climate retreat, and the military buildup in Latin America is viewed with suspicion. Chinese state media, for instance, calls the anti-drug reasoning a pretext for U.S. dominance.
It's also important to note how polarized the information sources themselves are, reflecting the domestic divisions.
Absolutely crucial. Sources that support the administration, like Newsbusters or American Thinker, frame these actions as vital, necessary responses to threats.
Well, critics
Critics like NPR or Alternet consistently question the legality, the data behind the claims, whether it's about left-wing violence or the economic necessity of tariffs.
And then you have another layer.
Right. The security-focused outlets like Zero Hedge or Americans for Public Trust, they often warn not just about internal conflict, but about foreign interference, even talking about alleged color revolution activities trying to destabilize the U.S. The distrust runs very deep in the information landscape itself.
So, given all this, what should listeners be watching for specifically in the coming weeks? What are the key things to track?
I'd say three main things. First, that Supreme Court ruling on the tariff emergency powers. That will be huge for defining executive economic power going forward.
Okay, the SCOTUS decision. What else?
Second, keep a very close eye on the U.S. military posture and any operational updates regarding Mexico and Venezuela. Any move towards those regime decapitation options, for instance, would be a massive international development.
Any escalation there would be critical. And third,
back in Washington, the Senate debate and potential vote on the Stop Antifa Act. That legislation will really shape the long-term legal approach to domestic political extremism in the U.S.
So SCOTUS on tariffs, military in Latin America, and the Stop Antifa Act vote. Key events to watch.
Definitely.
Here's a final thought, perhaps something for you to consider. When a nation like the U.S. pulls back from global cooperation like climate summits, while simultaneously ramping up nuclear testing and military force projection in its own hemisphere, are we seeing a new kind of isolationism? Or is it something else, maybe a shift towards a more unilateral, enforcement-heavy global role?
It's a profound question about the direction of American power.
Now, this deep dive, bringing you these perspectives and connections, was generated by Stylo News.
Right. Stylo News is a pretty sophisticated app available for mobile and desktop that lets you create your own customized intelligence briefs.
It works by pulling information from, over 250 traditional news sources, plus social media, forums, even video captions, all in real time.
And it translates across languages, uses advanced AI with vector search to analyze huge amounts of data quickly, and gives you cited insights, much like what we've discussed here.
Often in less than a minute, which is remarkable.
So if you need that kind of AI-powered news, on demand, fast, and accurate, we definitely recommend checking it out and subscribing.
You can find Stylo News and set up your own briefings at www.stylonews.com. That's STYLOnews.com.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, thank you for joining us for this analysis. It's been a complex couple of weeks to track.
We certainly hope this provided some clarity and a useful professional overview of these really interconnected challenges, both here at home and around the world. Feel free to reach out if you have topics you'd like us to cover in future deep dives, and do follow Stylo News on social media for ongoing updates.
Until next time, stay informed.